Welcome back, everyone, and Happy New Year. It's the Miami Boss Podcast. We have special guests with us, Judge Woody Clermont, and we're continuing just an amazing conversation. We're talking about his cousin, Kango Kid, that was part of a rap group in the 80s. We're talking about family. We're talking about family court matters. We're talking about issues with the criminal justice system. And we're talking about overall of his story of how he became a judge and his challenges and some of the things of the law that pertain to us and many of us that are watching this podcast today. And we're also talking about how technology is influencing the court system today. So thank you for joining us. Let's get back into the interview with Judge Woody Clermont.
First you call me a peach. The doctor wants to take me to the beach. I got a little rhyme for you each. I see
each of them had personalities. So the one on the left was Kango Kid, my cousin. The one in the middle, he used to call himself Dr. Ice. But, you know, he wasn't a real doctor, but that was his character. His persona was he was the doctor.
Gotcha.
And then the one on the right was called the educated rapper. And so he was all about being the nerd in the group.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So each of them had their roles. Kango was the, the jock. Dr. Ice was the medical professional. And then...
what year was this?
I want to say maybe 85?
Yeah, 85, yeah.
85,
okay.
86.
Man, those are good old days.
She said, I'm your Auntie Jean. I'm married to your mom's brother.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm the mother of the Kango Kid. And I was like, what? I was like, get out of here. You ever tried to make me feel better? She said, no, Kango Kid really is my son. I said, oh, wow. I never knew.
Some of this new technology, because that in itself is a game changer, right? It could create generational wealth for many people where, they never had access before to even the internet or a computer. And now all of a sudden, like, it's mandatory. If you do not have access to a phone or the internet, then you're falling behind. I mean, it's one of those things where, when I hear people don't have internet at their home, it's like, how could you not have internet, right? And we, the greatest country in the world, how could we be in America, right? And you don't have access to GPT, for example, or other AI tools to help you become more efficient. Numbers that I shared with you from the Metropolitan University, those are 2020 numbers. It's actually higher now. For youth, it's even higher. For Black youth, the juvenile detention center comprises of 71% Blacks. It's alarming. Hispanic, 16%. And white youth, only 11%. I shouldn't say only, it's not ideal.
It's very disproportionate, right? Because as a whole in this country, right, I think this country has more than 330 million people. And African Americans supposedly, even with Caribbeans combined, make up only 13% of that population. So if you see them dominating the jail system and the prison system, something's wrong, right? And we're being told that, well, that something is that minority youths are more criminal, or African-American males, young adults are more criminal. But again, that goes back to the enforcement of it, right? In other words, if, let's say, I want to say a few years ago, there were some kids that broke into Ray Allen's house, right? Miami Heat player.
Oh, okay, yes.
Right? They broke into the house and they started going throughout. I think it was young Caucasian and Hispanic males and females in the group. Mm-hmm. And they just started going around looking at the place like, oh, this is nice. Maybe I could take this with me, or and they're just going through this guy's house, and his wife is upstairs in the bedroom. Okay, and so when she realizes people have broken into her house, she starts screaming, and she calls the police. And so immediately the police response is. They were just kids, they were just
kids in my house. They
were just fooling around. They refused to make an arrest. They said, yeah, we gave them a stern warning and we sent them home.
Wow.
Okay, and so that, even that story didn't get a lot of press. It should have, because it shows you the great disparity between enforcement of different communities. It took the Allen family to have to go to the state attorney's office directly to then meet with prosecutors, give sworn statements, but then the prosecution office to have to file something. Yeah. And, the Allens originally wanted those kids to be charged with burglary, but even the state attorney's office was like, I don't want to ruin these kids. Yeah. They did commit a crime. Let's just charge them all with trespass. Right. And so that just goes to show you that if it had been the shoe on the other foot, if it had been a white home broken into, and these were young black males that were just fooling around, I don't think they would have gotten that quite of a deal, to either not being arrested on the scene and then later on to have lower charges and then to get a diversion program so that it comes off that record. So this is the issue and you know what? I work with police officers every day. I love the police. I don't have any particular preference for them as a judge, but I'm just saying I love them and that I've worked with them over the years. I've worked with a lot of very honest, hardworking police officers.
Many of them voted for you as well, right?
I'm sure that actually I did, because actually I remember, because I worked for Miami Beach, and I remember quite a few Miami Beach officers were texting me saying, "Yeah, I voted for you. Good luck." Because not every person who works in Miami Beach lives in Miami-Dade County. Right. So they were very aware of me. I did a great job. They did a great job. To my knowledge, they weren't doing anything that was untoward that I know of. But I'm not going to say that doesn't happen. The statistics show that something is going on. And pinning down those causes can be hard. Even the mere fact that people have complained about the 3/5 clause of the U.S. Constitution, right? And when people say that, they say, "Oh my God, the United States Constitution thinks I'm 3/5 of a person." That's not what that clause means. What that clause means is it's a means of counting people in different regional districts to determine how much money and resources should be allocated to those districts. So when the 3/5 clause was enacted back in the day, it was the North against the South having a fight because the South had many more slaves than the North did. But the North countered, well, those aren't real human beings. They're just slaves. So then the South said, okay, how about we make a deal? How about you only count them as 3/5 of a person? And the North said, we can live with that because at least it reflects that they're not a full United States citizen. And then whatever money and allocated resources is going to be at a lower level because of the fact that they're really just property. They're not actual human beings that should be counted for the purposes of the allocation. But that still goes on to this day. This is what
Why still have it in there?
I'm not saying they're still counting black people as 3/5.
Right.
But I'm saying the money and the resources being allocated still goes on to this day. So let me tell you how it works in the modern day and age. In the modern day and age, when you are sitting in prison, your population is counted by the number of people in your district. Places that have prisons have higher population counts because they're counting those folks, even though they've lost their rights, even though they have no freedom. Say like a place like I think it's Lake City, maybe I think is the name of it, which is further north, like you're going towards Jacksonville. That has a prison there, and that whole economy depends on that prison. A lot of people who work in that city, whites who work in that city, they are corrections guards, and they have these young black individuals and Hispanic individuals coming from further south that they're being housed there. And so now they have jobs to serve that population. In addition, they're getting more money and resources allocated by the federal government based on that particular constitutional provision.
I did not realize that. I did not know that.
Yeah, there are articles that have talked about it, about how places like New York City or Los Angeles or Miami, how these places generate a lot of money for places around the country that everybody wants to always stick their nose up and say, oh, you big metropolitan areas, city slickers, whatever. But the reality is the populations from those areas trickle over into so many different areas. And because of that reallocation, now where you can take young Miami black men and ship them upstate and have them in this prison for, 10 years. And then that place can now have people working jobs to serve that population and also get money and resources based on that population, even though that those individuals cannot vote, right? They don't get to vote in their district. They don't get to vote at all. They have to have their rights restored, right? That helps that area. And so there are articles that talk about how the rural areas always complain about the urban areas, but the urban areas is an economic driver for the rural areas. That we, as people who live in major metropolitan areas, we don't realize that our contributions, even in the court system, within the clerk system, money that's generated by, say, like Miami-Dade County or Broward County, that gets redistributed statewide.
Right.
So we're driving the amount of money and revenues available to those particular agencies, but the Florida state government then takes the liberty to take that money from them and say, you can't keep that money. Well, we need that to go here and here and here, which has lower populations and isn't raising as much money.
That's it's wild, and I was thinking about touching on child support, but I think that's just going to be a whole nother issue. Things going on about how that's being funded, which is just wild to me because it's actually what I was learning that actually gets help to fund some of judges' retirements. They put it in a big trust, and that's a compounding interest trust, and they're using some of that funding to pay off some of the retirement income for some of the jurists. It's wild, and I think the biggest way to combat some of this stuff is education. And we're getting back to the technology, because these issues is, they're real life issues, right? But I feel like there's this technology component to it. And speaking about the jail systems, right? Mm-hmm. When I started a school, the Green Children's House Montessori School, and one of the things in my research that I found was that the state of Florida, not just the state of Florida, other states as well, they're building jail systems based on third grade reading levels. So based on the child's third grade reading level, there's a simulator that could predict how people will get into trouble and how many jails will they need to build, how many cells will they need to have. It's wild, you're right. And so, sometimes we just go about life and, just kind of like aimlessly going through life and things happening, right? But there's also like a methodology that people are seeing that, hey, if people are not educated and if people are not having the right information, have the right environments, the propensity of them doing the crime is going to be much higher. Other thing I found out was that a lot of these contractors that are building the school systems, they're also building the jail systems. Mm-hmm. You ever walk through a school and it's like, hey, this kind of looks like, there's no windows here, and there's, it doesn't seem like a place that you'd really want to stay there all day and learn.
Right.
Well, guess what? Their model is a model that was derived from the prison and jail system and how they're building some of these schools. Of course, shelters as well, multi-purpose. But, if someone is building a jail, I wouldn't want them to have the expertise for inspiring people how to live and learn. I don't think that's a right recipe for success for the youth of our country. So that was one thing. Another thing I wanted to ask you. So we spoke about Zoom.
Yes.
And we talked about different technologies like blockchain. So one, there's things called smart contracts in blockchain, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you have a smart contract, a lot of times now, there's, especially with our older population, deeds are being stolen. And there's a lot of fraud happening. So do you think smart contracts would be something that you're going to be seeing more of in the court system? That's number one. And number two is Zoom here to stay? Yeah, do you think the virtual courtrooms, is that going to be going away? Or do you think like everyone's like, hey, this is going to be the generally accepted practice? And then the other thing I wanted to see if you could maybe dab into was augmented virtual reality, right? And I've seen it, like people using this, right? And I think in Broward County, there's been one case where they've used augmented reality to include into evidence in a criminal trial. So do you think we're going to be seeing more of that?
Okay, so address your first question, right?
Sorry, I did it on batch mode there.
I want to make sure that this, I answer every question. The first question is about contracts. And so I would say with contracts that contracts are primarily a private thing. And the reason why this is so important is because it's embedded in the Constitution that contracts are a private thing. In fact, there are some people who believe that contracts are sacrosanct to the point that nobody should ever be able to get out of a contract or have a reason not to enforce a contract if it's been validly entered into between two or more or however many parties. And so the problem is this, years ago, you used to have it where some neighborhoods, they had contracts between the landowners where they would say, you know what, you may not ever sell this house to a Jew. You may not ever sell this house to an Irish person. You may not ever sell this house to a Catholic. You may not ever sell this house to an African American or immigrant. And for years, even though the country had outlawed racism and any kind of racist practices, whenever they would go into court on these contracts, the thing would say, I have a right to contract under the Constitution. Just because it's racist doesn't mean you can stop me.
Oh.
And so for decades, contracts were not stopped. They went forward, however they went forward on the grounds that the right to contract is enshrined and guaranteed in the Constitution. Now, fast forward a little bit, the NAACP got creative. They said, yes, you're right. We cannot interfere into how contracts are made. However, when you bring a contract into court saying there's been a breach of contract, non-compliance with a contract, the court, in giving you a remedy, cannot do an illegal act. We have said that racism is illegal. Therefore, by enforcing a contract to keep minorities out of particular resident areas, residences, homes, you are now engaging in racism, which is illegal under our Constitution. And so it's through that argument that the NAACP was able to shut that argument down to say we can wade into contracts to the extent that the court should not be used as a vehicle for illegality.
Right.
Now, as the smart contracts question, I just wanted to do that as a background.
Yeah.
As a smart contracts question, I suspect that in the beginning, a lot of that is going to come forward in the business community and the private community, because again, it will be those private parties who do contracts by whatever means they want to do that. Is it better to do a smart contract? Absolutely, because it's got more particular guarantees through technology and so forth that can make sure that they're validly entered on the up and up. Instead of going to court where somebody's got this contract and then you wonder if they took page 8 and substituted it with another page and you know all kinds of phony baloney stuff that the judge is looking at like,
the thing about a smart contract is once certain conditions are met, then you have an executed agreement, right? And so then you could go forward, and then that contract is there digitally signed, and it's distributed across databases globally, right?
Correct.
So it's imputable, right? So it cannot be changed by anyone, and then you know that it's authentic, right? So
correct.
So that's one of those things. Where
I think it will make the job of judges and courts easier to have that kind of guarantee. Of course, there will always be the people who will try to reverse engineer and hack and do whatever they can to somehow cast some sort of shadow on smart contracts. But I think as the way it's described and enforced, it has a lot of guarantees to it that are probably a lot better than contracts where you have to basically initial every page and then make sure that initial matches up, and to make sure that there's been no phony baloney that it's like, oh well, parties A, B, and C got this contract, but parties D, E, and F got a different contract, and now everybody wondering what was the contract. So I definitely think that that's going to be a helpful thing for us going forward, to be able to have that technology. In other words, better living through technology.
Okay.
Now, your second question, if I remember correctly, actually remind me again. What was the second question?
Yeah. So was the Zoom?
Okay, Zoom. That was the second question.
Zoom. Yeah. Is it going anywhere?
So
right?
Zoom.
Is it here to stay?
Zoom is like this, right? I'm sure there are a lot of old-time judges that would like to see Zoom go bye-bye, because they're not really fans of it. They are used to a world where everything was in person.
It kind of sucks, right? I mean, always like in a computer, like adding people on, taking them off, and like.
Well, and also they have Zoom bombers, right? Zoom bombers.
What is that?
These are individuals.
I'm learning something new today.
These are individuals who, because the courtrooms have particular Zooms that you can log on to, and there's no way usually that the bailiff right off the bat is going to come in and say, well, you could set it up that way though, but a lot of times they don't. Usually it's just you're able to just jump on, and then you have to identify yourself. But some courtrooms that I've seen that have gotten ahead of that have it where the court is in a breakout room, right? So that when you come into the main area, you're not in the court. You're in an area that now the bailiff can screen you and say, okay, who are you? Turn on your screen. Who are you here for? What are you representing? And so forth. But still, it's supposed to technically be open to the public, right? Because Florida has a sunshine transparency law.
Yes.
But they do restrict it to some degree, because sometimes there's some suspicious individuals that may try to log on, and then when they log on, they're just here to Zoom bomb. And Zoom bomb means they're going to start taking a Pornhub and streaming it to the courtroom and everything, and they're going to have, it's wild, because you're in the middle of court, you're taking care of very serious business, and then you're hearing some woman say, "Give it to me harder, daddy," and you're just like, "Wait, what? What just happened?" So it's wild, But
wildly inappropriate.
They're doing this to antagonize the courts, to kind of thumb their nose up at the courts, to say, this is what we feel about your system. And so the problem is they have software that's so advanced. The software is able to log them out and log them back on, log them out, log them back on, so that when you go to try to terminate that user, They now come in under another name, and so you keep trying to terminate every connection. So eventually, you just want to block that whole IP address or something to keep them out permanently. But sometimes it's not always easy for the bailiffs to do because sometimes they're chasing after them to whatever. But now when you have that breakout room being the court, they can only be confined to that waiting room. So if they want to Zoom bomb all day long, they're going to have to be verified as someone who legitimately has business there.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Wow.
So that and is it going to go away? I don't think it will, because I think that court is nothing if it doesn't have access for the public.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that it's something we should have done a long time ago, but many people resisted. But now with COVID-19, and COVID-19 is technically not truly over. It may not be the epidemic we once viewed it to be, but we do still have variants out there still kicking around. People can still get sick from it. You should still be vigilant.
Yeah.
So I think to that extent, they don't want to take that away to have to reinvent the wheel and start over and then start implementing again. So they kind of keep it there. And there are, ways that people can do it. The judge can say to you, okay, next court appearance, I'll allow you to appear over Zoom or whatever. But then they'll say, but the appearance after that, I want you here in person. Being over Zoom is not going to count, and I won't admit you to Zoom. I want you here in person. So it's going to always exist in some sort of hybrid form where you have options, particularly if you ask in advance. Like if I have a trial coming up, I have to file a motion with the judge saying, my witness lives in Kansas, and the cost of flying them in and out would be cost prohibitive, especially when we don't know for sure if we're going to trial. Can you please grant this motion to have my witness appear over Zoom? So, and then what was the third question now?
Augmented reality, virtual reality. So, so that's something that's big, right? And so, you're going to have, you've been doing Zoom, but then as far as presenting evidence, maybe someone could have a virtual reality setup and then take people there to the actual crime scene, so you could actually experience what that's like and how it's like.
It's just like anything. It's just like anything in the courtroom, right? We have different types of evidence that we can use, right? We have physical evidence, right, which are things that are seized from the scene, and so forth. We also have videos that can be impounded, but then we also have demonstrative aids, which are not really truly evidence, but they're something that we can use when appropriate to help clarify the evidence we're viewing in our mind. So sometimes
demonstrative aids.
Demonstrative aids. Yes.
Okay.
For example, like if you have a huge financial case, you're going to enter the ledgers into the record as the evidence, right? But maybe the jury doesn't want to go through hundreds of pages of looking through the ledgers.
They want to graph.
So maybe they want to see it in a real summary form. So you can then ask permission and have a board up that's going to have everything summarized nice and easy for the jury to look at, so that impression sticks in their mind. Also, sometimes you may have experts who come to testify. Right? I remember one particular murder trial where the issue was that the defendant had stabbed the victim in the back. And so obviously the prosecution saying this is a clear case of them targeting this victim and wanting to hurt them. It's premeditated. Wow. Whereas the defense was, no, it was self-defense. And then people were like, self-defense from the back? How? Wow. How does that happen? So the guy brought in an expert on fighting, so to speak, right? And he basically took a dummy, and he was able to kind of wrangle his arm a certain way that if the guy was on the ground, that he could get his arm around and then stab the guy from the back like this to get him off of him, to show that he was on the ground, he was pinned. It was a defensive maneuver because he's getting, hurt by this guy, and so he's stabbing him in the back to get him off of him so he could get away from the threat. The jury has to decide if that's common sense, if that makes sense or not in the context of the crime, but it's a demonstrative aid. So same thing with these, you can have visits to crime scenes. You can say, Your Honor, I want to move to be able to have the jury go to the crime scene, or have you, the judge, go to the crime scene. So you can take that trip, or like you said, you can have augmented reality, where you can basically have videos done, 360 videos done of everything. Yeah. So now you can go down to the crime scene. It's a accurate representation, a fair and accurate representation of what is depicted at the crime scene. So now they get to see for themselves what's going on by having these goggles on, whatever method is, and that would really help jurors in making decisions, or judges in making decisions. So I believe it's going to continue to go forward into the future, that we're going to keep having more and more of that.
Okay. Man, we've covered so much here. I still have one or two more questions. I still got to get you out before. I know when you start, you're going to be busy and thousands of the calls. So Do you have any concerns about how the rapidly changing technology might outpace the legal standards?
Well, that's always going to happen. I mean, that's it goes without saying. Just like, and sometimes we don't allow certain technology.
Like AI, right? I mean,
AI is with caveats, right? In other words, you need to be verifying your sources. So you don't want to be in the business of just relying on AI to do the heavy lifting. No human person has reviewed the results, and you submit that to a court, and then the court says, this is wholly inaccurate. Where did you get this from? Right. And then you tell the court, well, I had AI do it. It's like, well, we're paying you as a person to do this case, not an AI, whatever. That's your tool, but you have to remain the master over that. So whatever you submit needs to be reviewed by you. So be careful with AI in that respect.
But the court system is looking at that as a viable tool to maybe lessen the burden on the jurists, right? I mean,
I think the judges will still be using their own because they have to judge things. They're not going to say, well, AI, go ahead and review these motions that were filed. Let me know if these motions are any good. No, the judge is going to have to review those motions. We're not going to trust AI to make a decision for the judge. However, if I'm a party and then the party's trying to prove certain things and they say, well, you know what? When in their statements, because we took a 200-page deposition of the guy, where in their statements did they say that, oh yeah, no, that wouldn't be allowed, and then where did they say that would be allowed? So now you can use AI to target those particular phrases throughout the 200-page transcript, find them for you, give you the breakdown on every page they appear on, and that makes your job easier now as a litigator because you can basically have it all, organized for you. So that you are still the one doing the argument, you're still the one asking the questions, you're still the one that's doing the presentations, but you now know where everything is because the AI is making your life easier.
Yeah. Are they using any other tools such as like Utter.io?
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, so Utter, and I think Teams does the same thing. They're basically the AI, typically you'd have a court reporter, but now, basically it summarizes it verbatim. The AI basically takes every word and creates a chat transcript, and then it summarizes it for you.
I believe there's some use of that. It depends on the court system. Like, for example, I know back in Miami, county court transcripts are done by a recorder, meaning that you don't have a court reporter actually typing things out.
Okay.
You have a person who's sitting there monitoring the computer, and the computer's recording everything.
There it goes, yeah.
So when you actually want to get transcripts, you then have to order that DVD or whatever, and take it to a court reporter who's going to go listen to everything and then transcribe it. But with this technology we have now, where you can do the closed captions, and the AI can generate it on the fly, then I think that would be very helpful. But I still think you still need to have a human person to go back and check behind to make sure there's no mistakes.
Ordering those court transcripts get very costly after a while, right? I mean, it's like,
they do.
An hour is like, it runs into the thousands of dollars just for.
I know for county court, criminal, that's the standard for civil and family. You have to have your own court reporter. They're not going to give one to you. So really, it's going to be based on whether the litigants want to use or trust something like that. But I would imagine that it's going to become more and more popular over time. That as it gets more and more reliable, we're going to see a lot of it.
Well, I was going to ask you something for fun in closing. So I was going to ask you, since your background in computer science, that if you could implement any sort of futuristic technology in a courtroom, what would it be and why?
What would it be and why? Well, what would I implement? I think the most important thing is to have, if we're going to continue to use Zoom, which I believe we will, I think it's important to have the type of technology that can really capture all aspects of the courtroom. Because that was one of the biggest experiences I had in doing hearings over Zoom, is that sometimes you want to have testimony that's pointing to something, and it might involve pointing to something in the courtroom, but because the Zoom camera is so limited, you can't see that thing in the moment.
Right.
And so I know in the courtroom that I'm going to, supposedly they do have something that's supposed to be able to do like a 360 capture. But I'd like to see more of those technologies implemented, because it's still going to be 360 from the place where the camera is set up. But I'd like to be able to have 360s in lots of different areas of the courtroom so that you can see the entire courtroom. Because that can be a big difference of, oh, well, do you see the person that committed the crime? And you're looking around, and the camera never goes to the area where that person is. Oh, wow. And so that person's thinking, I have to choose from whatever I saw, and they choose the wrong person. And so that can be a huge issue.
So the person's in the courtroom,
and
you're remote, or the
in other words, like, let's say I have a witness who's in, I don't know, Dubai, right? And so they're not being flown to the United States. And they were hit by, as a tourist. When they came to the United States, they were hit as a tourist by someone on the street. And now they flew back to Dubai. So now you're telling them, okay, I need you to identify the person in the courtroom, because that person will be in the courtroom in person.
Yes.
And so now they've got to go and look, and if the camera's not pointing at that person, they might think, oh, well, you know, he looks like the guy in the blue shirt over there. And you're like, well, you just picked a juror. It's like, it's like, oh, but I didn't really see the other guy, you know, and, you know, so as a result, you know, they don't really get that feel of how it is to truly be in the courtroom itself. You get a limited range of what the camera will pick up on. And so unless you have it set up in a way to capture every part of the courtroom, you're going to be cheated of that experience.
Wow, that's great. That's great insight there. What's one piece of advice would you give young professionals balancing kind of traditional and technology in the leadership roles? You know, we had just a tremendous amount of success with just getting the vote out for you last minute. And I know some people hate it as far as the text messaging. But I felt like that was maybe the icing on the cake. I felt that you did such a great job with canvassing and being out there in front of the community. But then that's the technicality of someone actually, okay, let's filling in that circle, and they're getting in, well, you know, hey, vote for Woody Clermont right away. And so, you know, I just think it was remarkable how strategic you were, quite frankly. You hit, you know, the churches, you were out in the streets canvassing, you're on social media, you know, you had a digital marketing presence, and then, but after all, you also one-on-one communicated with, you know, via the text messaging platform. And some people even responded back, you know, mostly really great, some not so good, but mostly really good. And just, that was really cool. And, you know, and you had a younger opponent, and it didn't seem like he was that robust with his technology as much as you were, right? I mean, I felt that you know, it was a complete knockout, if you will, put it in boxing terms.
I can't complain to know exactly what technology he used. So maybe he did use some technology, but maybe he just didn't use it effectively. Right. I don't know for sure because I don't know what he used. I know when he
didn't hire me as his technology advisor.
That I think right there is an automatic path to defeat. So I think that you need to have Dominic on the case here, because if you don't have him, you're shortchanging yourself. There's so many votes you could capture with him on your team. So he definitely was excellent in that regard. And as he was speaking about the people that were for me, people not for me, you know, you got responses like, hey, I voted for the Woodman. Oh, the Woodster's my guy. You know, and then you had other people talking about, you know, Park for Stark. But, you know,
I didn't go anywhere.
But it's going to be something that, you know, people who know him and are, you know, allied with him are going to want to stick with him. But I think we did a good job in terms of getting the message out to the public, because at the end of it all, it was all about having the wisdom and the experience to rise to the position. And so, you know, the reality was that he was a 10-year attorney, but I'm a 20-year attorney who also was a business professional 10 years before that. So
you really dwarfed his experience in a sense.
I dwarfed his experience in that sense. And so what I feel is the right outcome happened. Now, maybe his team would just beg to differ, but the word getting out there, particularly having the website presence, you know, having the ability to make videos and little commercials and ads, all that really got the message out there that when, you know, I had a lot of people calling me up on the phone, telling me I looked at the 2 pages and I see a guy, nice guy. The other guy seems like a very nice guy, but you have all these lists of accolades on your page.
Right.
It's to me, it's a huge difference. I think we were definitely able to leverage that to our advantage, because there's some people that really just said, I don't want to be told what to do. I want to research myself who is the very best. So I think people need to continue to use technology going into the future, because quite frankly, you're shortchanging yourself if you don't, right? You need to get those emails out. You need to get those text messages out. In any way you can engage with the voters, you do. Obviously, I also hit the trail. You know, I was, as you said, going to the churches, going to the community events, you know, visiting with people in their neighborhoods, in their communities, having people out there with the flyers. You know, even doing the mailers. The mailers is very expensive nowadays, and I don't think it used to be once upon a time, if you didn't have the mailers, you lost.
Okay.
Now I think we're moving from an age where, yes, the mailers are a component, but it's not the make or break of the campaign. There's so many other ways you can reach people nowadays in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you feel that I remember that evening watching the news, and I saw your picture up there, and then there were various outlets, and like county judge, and then it was not like close. It was significant, I mean, and we sent out like close to, I want to say, like 500,000 text messages to people, and it's like, how did you feel knowing all the challenges, all the adversity? People, I'm sure they probably thought you couldn't do it, situations you had in your job, and then waking up or, go to sleep that night as a county court judge.
Well, I mean, for starters, I always tell everyone my faith in God is what got me through. And that is where it began and where it ended. It was God who told me to run. It was God who told me to keep going. And it was God who told me you will win. And so all throughout, did I have some dark moments? Yeah, because, in the August primary, I was in the second place out of 3 candidates. And the distance was huge. So that's why the Sun Sentinel immediately started reporting, oh, we don't even think this guy has a chance. Nobody seems to know him. He was at least this many thousand votes behind his opponent.
Yeah, I was not happy that they didn't endorse you. That just showed that the money.
They didn't. Yeah.
They were just, I don't know. It seemed like they were not really guiding the people towards the right decision, and yet that still didn't matter. The voters of Broward County.
It's always about relationships, and so I don't have a relationship with Sun Sentinel, but I believe his consultants did, and so he was able to monopolize on that. But at the end of the day, that may have also created a bit of overconfidence as well, because at the end of the day, I went to the people with the right messaging, and so when I was done with my work, when I finally set up, I think more than 350 signs all around Broward County, and I come home and I'm tired and say, I'm just going to watch Netflix, and everybody's like, just the election, you should be glued to the screen. No, God said I'm going to win. I'm good. and so the results showed. I believe a particular individual who reached out to me about the numbers indicated I won 25 of 31 cities.
Incredible.
And the final count was 59,660 votes that I was over my opponent, which is huge. There are many other races with far less money spent that were far closer than that. So it was definitely a resounding victory. I think my daughter said it best when she said, you were never behind the entire night. You were always ahead. And the lead just grew larger and larger and larger as the night progressed. It was like a confident, easy win.
Yeah, and really that speaks volumes of not just you, but just the community, right? And what this victory means for the community, right? It's not just a win for you, it's a win for everyone, and that's inspiring, even in the legal profession. I mean, to see, just more justice, more people that, have a similar stories to them, more people that have a, very, extremely educated background, and, Haitian descent, have that work ethic where we, basically came from nothing to chase the American dream. So,
yeah, my mother worked as a housekeeper in a medical center. And my father worked cutting metals, a metal shearer, So they were hardworking individuals, and they came and they worked, and they busted their behinds, and anything I needed as a student, they got from me, because they said, our job is to make you better and for you to have the best opportunities when you grow up.
Wow. Judge Woody Clermont, everybody, thank you so much for being here on the Miami Boss podcast. And this is a boss, right? And he serves the bosses of bosses that he told you. He's the, he serves our God, and that's a man of faith, and a man that speaks the truth and justice. And it's been an honor to have met you and to work for you to get you elected. And we look forward to having you serve the hard men and working women of Broward County.
I think that is exactly it. It's leader-servant model. In other words, you can be a leader, but don't forget who you're serving. You're here at the leisure of the people. They put me here to do a job. I'm here to serve them. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in the Miami Boss podcast. It was great having Judge Woody Clermont, Broward County Circuit Judge. Thank you so much. And join us next week for another amazing podcast, and we may have another special guest for you, and it's going to be all about a new app that's being launched centered around AI, but I'm not going to spill the beans yet. You guys got to tune in next week and find out what this is all about. Thank you so much. Let's get 2025 off to a great new year, and make sure that you're doing everything that you can to be better, faster, and quicker using technology. Have a great week, guys.